They say marriage is supposed to be built on love, respect, and trust. But mine turned into a battlefield where my dignity was stripped away piece by piece. Unclear, and for 10 years, I believed I had the perfect marriage. My husband, Daniel, was charming, successful, and, at least in the beginning, so attentive. Everyone envied us. They called us the golden couple. But what they didn't know was that behind closed doors, my husband's love had slowly turned into cruelty. It started small. Subtle comments. A roll of the eyes when I spoke. A sigh when I entered the room. And then, as if testing how much I could endure, Daniel's cruelty escalated. "You're so boring, Claire," he'd say at dinner. "Why can't you dress like other women? Do you even realize how plain you are compared to the women I meet every day?" I used to brush it off. I told myself he was just stressed, that maybe he didn't mean it. But deep down, those words pierced me, and I started doubting myself. And then she entered the picture. Her name was Melissa. She was younger, glamorous, with long dark hair and a smile that could make men weak. At first, Daniel introduced her as a friend from work. But the way his eyes lingered on her, the way his phone lit up at night with her name, I knew. I just didn't want to admit it. One evening, Daniel told me he was going out for a business dinner. I stayed home, curled up with a book, but something inside me felt unsettled. Hours passed and my phone buzzed. It was a message from my friend Julia, who worked in the same district. "Claire, I just saw Daniel. He's at the Grand Hotel restaurant, and he's not alone." My heart raced. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew I had to see it for myself. I grabbed my coat, hailed a cab, and arrived at the hotel. My hands trembled as I walked inside. And then, I froze. There he was. My husband. My Daniel. Sitting at a table with Melissa, his hand resting over hers as if it belonged there. They were laughing, whispering. The intimacy between them was undeniable. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm over and demand answers. But instead, I stood there, paralyzed as tears welled in my eyes. And that's when it happened. Daniel spotted me. For a split second, his face twisted in shock. But then he smiled. Not out of guilt. Not out of shame. But out of arrogance. "Claire," he called out loudly, waving me over. "Come join us." I couldn't believe it. The nerve. The audacity. But I walked toward them anyway, my legs heavy as if carrying the weight of the betrayal. When I reached the table, Daniel looked at me with that cruel smirk I had come to hate. "Melissa, this is my wife," he said casually, as if introducing me at a cocktail party. "Claire, meet Melissa. Isn't she stunning?" Melissa gave me a polite, almost pitying smile. "Hello, Claire. I've heard so much about you." My voice cracked as I tried to keep it together. "Daniel, what is this? What's going on?" He leaned back in his chair, sipping his wine with ease. "Relax, Claire. Don't make a scene. I just thought it was time you met her. After all, Melissa understands me in ways you never could." The words cut like knives. I felt the room spin, humiliation burning in every inch of me. People around us were watching, whispering. My husband had dragged me into the lion's den, just to humiliate me. Melissa shifted uncomfortably, as if realizing this was crossing a line. "Daniel, maybe this isn't." But he raised his hand, silencing her. "No, Melissa. She needs to hear this. Claire, you've been living in your little bubble for too long. I've tried. Really, I have. But you're not enough for me anymore. You're dull. Predictable. And I deserve excitement." I wanted to break down, to crumble right there on the floor. But something inside me snapped instead. Maybe it was the way he looked at me like I was worthless. Maybe it was the way Melissa sat there awkwardly, caught in the middle of his arrogance. I stood taller, wiping the tears from my eyes. You think I'm dull, Daniel? You think I'm predictable? You'll regret underestimating me. His smirk widened. Is that a threat, Claire? Please. What could you possibly do? The entire restaurant was silent now, all eyes on us. And though my heart was breaking, my voice was steady. You'll find out soon enough. I turned on my heel and walked out, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me crumble further. But as I stepped into the cold night air, my hands clenched into fists. This wasn't over. He had humiliated me, dragged me into his twisted game. But he had no idea what I was capable of. Because that night, as tears streamed down my face, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't just survive this betrayal. I would rise from it. And when I did, I would shock Daniel and his mistress in a way they'd never see coming. He thought humiliating me would break me. But what he didn't know was that I had already begun planning the one move that would destroy his perfect little fantasy. When I left the restaurant that night, the cold wind slapped my face, but nothing hurt more than Daniel's words echoing in my head. You're dull. Predictable. Not enough. I replayed every second of that humiliation. The way he paraded me like some insignificant accessory. The way he praised her, Melissa, while tearing me apart. I felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath me. But here's the thing about betrayal. It either destroys you or it builds a fire so strong you become unstoppable. And I chose the fire. For the first time in years, I stopped asking myself why he didn't love me anymore. Instead, I asked myself, why should I even care if he did? The following morning, Daniel strutted into the kitchen as if nothing had happened. He tossed his briefcase on the counter, kissed my cheek, a mockery of affection, and said, "Don't sulk, Claire. You embarrassed yourself enough last night." I froze, coffee cup in hand. Embarrassed myself? The audacity nearly made me laugh. Embarrassed myself? I repeated, my voice trembling with restrained fury. You humiliated me in front of your mistress, Daniel. He shrugged, buttoning his cufflinks. You needed a wake-up call. Maybe now you'll stop pretending you're enough for me. Something inside me snapped again. But this time, I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I smiled. A small, quiet smile that made him pause. What's so funny? He asked. Nothing, I said softly. Just, you'll regret underestimating me. He scoffed. I doubt that. Then he left for work, leaving me in the silence of our kitchen. But little did he know. His arrogance had just signed his downfall. The next days, I played my role perfectly. I was calm, quiet, obedient. To Daniel, it must have seemed like I'd accepted my fate, like I'd resigned myself to being the invisible wife. But behind closed doors, I was plotting. I started with information. Daniel prided himself on being a successful businessman. He controlled our finances, our investments, even our home under his name. But what he didn't realize was that years ago, when he begged me to handle the boring paperwork, I had quietly kept copies of everything. Bank statements, contracts, property deeds, every single thing he tried to hide. And oh, there was plenty to hide. Through those late nights of digging, I discovered something Daniel wouldn't want Melissa or anyone to know. He was in debt. A lot of it. Behind his fancy suits and flashy dinners, he was drowning. And I had the proof. One evening, about a week after the humiliation, Daniel waltzed into the house, whistling. He wore a new watch, an expensive one I knew he couldn't afford. Like it? He asked, flashing it in my face. Melissa picked it out. She has exquisite taste. I wanted to snatch it off his wrist and smash it. But instead, I tilted my head and said calmly, "Enjoy it while you can." He raised an eyebrow. What's that supposed to mean? I smiled sweetly. Nothing at all. He laughed, shaking his head. You're pathetic, Claire. Pathetic. He had no idea. Meanwhile, Melissa was becoming an unintentional ally in my plan. I knew she thought she had won. That smug look on her face at the restaurant was burned into my memory. But women like Melissa, they wanted more than stolen moments in hotel restaurants. They wanted rings, houses, titles. And Daniel, well, Daniel couldn't give her that without tearing apart the illusion of his perfect life. So I waited. I waited for cracks to appear. And soon, they did. One Saturday afternoon, while Daniel was working late, I went to the very same hotel where I'd caught them before. I wasn't there to spy this time. I was there to make my presence known. I walked into the lobby wearing a dress I hadn't touched in years. Red. Bold. Powerful. Heads turned as I entered, but I kept walking, heels clicking against the marble floor until I saw them. Daniel and Melissa, sitting at the bar. Melissa's arms were crossed. Her face was tight with frustration. "You promised me, Daniel," she was saying. "You said you'd leave her." My heart skipped, but I didn't flinch. I stood behind a pillar, listening. Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. "I will. Just give me time." "The finances are complicated." Melissa scoffed. "Finances? Or excuses?" "Because I'm not waiting forever." I nearly laughed. The cracks were showing. I stepped out from behind the pillar and walked straight toward them. Melissa saw me first. Her eyes widened. "Claire." Daniel spun around, his jaw tightening. "What are you doing here?" I smiled. "Oh, just enjoying a drink." "I didn't expect to find you two here." Again, Melissa's face flushed with embarrassment. Daniel, on the other hand, looked furious. "Go home, Claire." But instead of obeying, I leaned close to Melissa, lowering my voice. "You know, Melissa, you should be careful. Men who cheat on their wives usually cheat on their mistresses too." Her eyes widened. She glanced at Daniel, searching for reassurance. But he just sat there, silent, his face red with anger. I turned to leave, but before I did, I whispered to Daniel, "Enjoy this while it lasts. Soon, you'll have nothing left to flaunt." And then I walked away, leaving them both unsettled. That night, when Daniel came home, he slammed the door so hard the walls shook. "Why are you doing this?" he barked. "Why can't you just stay out of my business?" I looked at him calmly. "Because you made me part of it the moment you humiliated me. And now, Daniel, I'm not your silent little wife anymore." His eyes narrowed, filled with rage. "You think you can beat me, Claire? You're nothing without me." I smiled. "We'll see about that." And in that moment, I knew. The game had truly begun. He still thought he had control. But soon, I would pull the rug from under his feet, and when I did, both he and Melissa would fall harder than they ever imagined. The following days were a dance of silence and secrets. Daniel walked around the house puffed up with his usual arrogance, but I could see the flicker of unease in his eyes. My words at the hotel had rattled him. And Melissa? She had grown colder with him, her demands louder, her patience thinner. Exactly as I wanted. I wasn't rushing. Revenge is never served hot. It's a slow-cooked meal rich with timing. And I was savoring every second. One evening, as Daniel showered, I went through his phone. He'd grown careless, assuming I was too broken to bother checking. But his arrogance was my blessing. Messages flashed across the screen. "Melissa, you're stalling, Daniel. If you don't leave her, I'll make you regret it. Daniel, I told you, I'm handling it. Just give me 2 more weeks. Melissa, 2 weeks? I'm not a fool. I know about your debts." I froze. So Melissa knew. This was better than I thought. She wasn't just his mistress, she was leverage. If she pushed too hard, Daniel would break. If she left him, he'd spiral. Either way, I won. But I didn't want either way. I wanted something permanent. Something that would strip him of everything, money, pride, reputation, until all that was left was the shell of the man who once mocked me. So I made my move. The next morning, I dressed in a sharp navy suit I hadn't worn since my old corporate days. As I applied my makeup, Daniel glanced up, suspicious. "Where are you going?" I smiled at him through the mirror. "Out." "Out where?" He pressed, his tone sharp. I met his gaze, unblinking. "You don't get to know anymore." The flash of irritation across his face nearly made me laugh. For years, he treated me like furniture. Now he realized the furniture could walk away. I drove straight to the bank, armed with the folder of documents I had been collecting. Property deeds, mortgage papers, hidden loan agreements, all in Daniel's name, but linked to accounts he thought were buried. The bank manager, an old acquaintance, flipped through the documents with raised brows. "You've done your homework, Claire." I leaned in. "I need to know exactly how bad it is." He sighed, tapping the papers. "Your husband's leveraged everything. The house, the cars, even his company's shares. If the creditors call in these loans, he's finished." I exhaled slowly. Finished. That word lingered in my chest like sweet music. "Good," I whispered. That's exactly what I needed to know. That evening, I returned home to find Daniel waiting in the living room, drink in hand. "You've been sneaking around," he said flatly. I raised an eyebrow. "Paranoid much?" His jaw tightened. "Melissa told me she saw you near the hotel again. Are you spying on me?" I smirked. "I don't need to spy, Daniel. You're careless enough to expose yourself without me trying." His grip tightened on the glass. "You think you're clever, don't you?" I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "No, Daniel. I don't think I am. I know I am. And soon. So will you." I left him stewing in his anger, the sound of his glass shattering behind me as I went upstairs. Over the next week, I fed the fire between Daniel and Melissa. A subtle word here, a pointed look there. I let Melissa see me leaving in tailored suits, let her wonder if Daniel was losing me or worse, losing control. Melissa hated not being the center of attention. She started sending Daniel angrier texts, pushing him harder. One night, their argument got so loud I could hear it through the phone Daniel forgot to silence. Melissa screaming, "You promised me everything. Money, security, a future. But all you've given me are lies." Daniel snapping, "Do you think I'm made of gold? You're lucky I even chose you over her." Melissa's sharp laugh cut through the line. "Chose me? Daniel, you can't even afford me. You're a broke liar. When your wife finally leaves, you'll have nothing." The line went dead. Daniel stormed into the bedroom minutes later, his face pale. He didn't even notice me pretending to sleep. He was cracking. The final piece of my plan came sooner than expected. Melissa, furious and impatient, showed up at our house. It was Saturday morning. I opened the door to see her standing there, arms crossed, her face twisted in disdain. "Melissa," I said sweetly. "What a surprise." She smirked. "Save it, Claire." I came to see Daniel. Before I could reply, Daniel appeared behind me, his face draining of color. "Melissa, what are you doing here?" She shoved past me, glaring at him. "I'm done waiting. Either you leave her or I'll expose you." "Expose him?" I asked, tilting my head. Melissa spun toward me. "Oh, don't play innocent. Your husband is broke. He's been lying to both of us. He's drowning in debt, and soon he won't have a penny left." Daniel's face went crimson. "Melissa, shut up." But I was smiling. Oh, how I was smiling. "You know, Melissa," I said softly, "I think you've just handed me exactly what I needed." She frowned. "What are you talking about?" I turned to Daniel, locking eyes with him. "You thought you humiliated me. You thought you broke me. But now everyone will know the truth. The successful Daniel, the man who belittled his wife, who cheated on her with a woman half her age, is nothing but a bankrupt fraud. His voice shook with rage. You wouldn't dare. I stepped closer, my smile razor sharp. Watch me. Melissa stormed out, slamming the door. Daniel collapsed onto the couch, running his hands through his hair. You think you've won, Claire? He hissed. I crouched in front of him, my voice calm, almost tender. Oh, Daniel, I haven't even started. Daniel now knew I held the upper hand. But what he didn't know was that my next move wouldn't just ruin him, it would erase the very image he had built of himself. By the time I was done, the world would see him for what he truly was. A broken man with nothing left to give. Daniel didn't sleep that night. I could hear him pacing downstairs, muttering under his breath, pouring drink after drink as if alcohol could drown the mess he'd made of his life. I, however, slept soundly. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. Because now, the mask was off. Melissa had handed me the final piece of the puzzle. Daniel's debts were no longer my private suspicion. They were a weapon I could use, sharp enough to cut through every lie he'd built. The following Monday, I made my first public move. I arrived at Daniel's company headquarters in my navy suit, heels clicking against the marble floor. Employees who once barely acknowledged me now turned their heads, whispers following in my wake. Isn't that Daniel's wife? She looks different. She looks powerful. Exactly the impression I wanted. I went straight to the boardroom where Daniel's investors were meeting. He hadn't expected me there, but I had timed it perfectly. The moment he walked in and saw me sitting confidently at the head of the table, his face drained of color. Claire, he stammered. What are you doing here? I folded my hands neatly. I'm here to share some enlightening information. The investors looked confused, murmuring among themselves. Gentlemen, I began, my voice steady. Daniel has led you to believe this company is thriving, that your money is safe in his hands. But here are the facts. I laid out copies of the documents I had collected, loan statements, mortgage defaults, hidden debts. Gasps filled the room as the men flipped through the papers. One of the older investors glared at Daniel. Is this true? Daniel slammed his fist on the table. This is nonsense. She's trying to sabotage me, my bitter wife who can't stand the fact that I moved on. I tilted my head, smiling faintly. If I were lying, Daniel, why don't you explain this one? I slid forward the most damning document, a foreclosure notice on one of his luxury properties. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Daniel's voice broke. Claire, please. But the damage was done. One by one, the investors gathered their things and stormed out, muttering about fraud, betrayal, and lawsuits. By the end, only Daniel and I remained in the room. His hands shook as he pointed at me. You ruined me. I rose slowly, meeting his trembling gaze. No, Daniel. You ruined yourself. I just made sure the world saw it. By that evening, the fallout had already begun. Word spread like wildfire. Daniel Bennett, the man who bragged about his empire, was bankrupt. Melissa wasted no time. She plastered her social media with bitter posts, accusing Daniel of lying to her, using her, wasting her youth. Screenshots of his text to her started circulating online. By the time the gossip blogs picked it up, Daniel was the talk of the city. CEO exposed as fraud. Married man's mistress reveals his lies. Daniel Bennett, from powerhouse to penniless. Each headline was a dagger, and I relished every single one. But Daniel wasn't done. He couldn't be. He stormed into the house late that night, disheveled, eyes wild. You think this is funny, don't you? He shouted, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I looked up from my book calmly. I think it's justice. He staggered closer, pointing a trembling finger at me. I gave you everything. This house, this life. And this is how you repay me? I stood, finally letting the fire inside me show. You gave me nothing, Daniel. Nothing but betrayal, humiliation, and lies. You cheated on me, mocked me, and treated me like I was disposable. Now you're getting exactly what you deserve. His face crumpled, but then his voice softened, pleading. Claire, I need you. I can fix this, but not without you. Please, don't leave me. For a moment, I saw the desperation of a man stripped of his armor. The mighty Daniel Bennett, begging. I almost pitied him. Almost. But pity was a luxury he hadn't earned. You should have thought of that before you threw me away, I whispered coldly. I walked past him, up the stairs, leaving him alone in the ruins of his pride. Over the next week, Daniel's empire collapsed. Creditors seized assets. The company filed for bankruptcy. Friends who once worshipped him stopped returning calls. Melissa moved on quickly, flaunting a new, wealthier man on her arm. And Daniel? He stayed home, unshaven, drowning in self-pity. The man who once strutted like a king now shuffled like a ghost. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because Daniel still had one thing left. Me. And I intended to take that away too. One Friday evening, I returned home with divorce papers in hand. He was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the dark television screen. Daniel, I said firmly. It's time. His eyes flickered to the papers, then back to me. You're really leaving? Yes, I said without hesitation. And I'm taking half of what's left. He gave a bitter laugh. Half of nothing is still nothing. I stepped closer, my tone sharp. Not true. The house, the little bit of savings you haven't wasted, your retirement account, I'll be taking my share. And then you'll have truly nothing. He buried his face in his hands. Please, Claire, don't do this. I can change. I'll be better. I stared at him, remembering every cruel word, every betrayal, every time he made me feel like I wasn't enough. And I smiled. No, Daniel. I don't want you to change. I want you to remember, every day, that the woman you underestimated, the wife you betrayed, is the one who destroyed you. I placed the papers in front of him. Sign them. His hand shook as he picked up the pen. His signature dragged across the page like a death sentence. And just like that, Daniel Bennett's world ended. As I walked out of that house, the night air felt cool and freeing. For the first time in years, I wasn't Daniel's wife. I was Claire Bennett, a woman reborn from the ashes of betrayal. And my revenge was complete. Claire has destroyed Daniel's empire, exposed his lies, and taken her freedom. But as she steps into her new life, a new question looms. Can she truly move on from the scars he left behind? Or will her need for revenge consume her even after he's gone? The day after Daniel signed the divorce papers, I stood in front of the courthouse with the documents in my hand. The city buzzed with life around me, but inside I felt a stillness. A calm I hadn't felt in years. I had thought this moment would taste like victory. That seeing Daniel destroyed, broken, and abandoned would fill me with satisfaction. And in a way, it did. But as I watched couples walk past, holding hands, laughing together, I realized something deeper. Revenge had freed me, but it hadn't healed me. The weeks that followed were strange. Daniel moved out of the house. He ended up renting a small apartment on the other side of town, far from the life of luxury he once flaunted. Occasionally, I'd hear whispers, how he was seen begging old contacts for help, how people laughed at him behind his back. Melissa, of course, had vanished into her new life, showing off expensive vacations with her new lover. I never thought much about her anymore. She was a pawn in Daniel's betrayal, nothing more. For the first time in a long time, I had silence. No shouting matches. No suspicious phone calls. No pretending to smile while my heart bled. Just me But freedom also came with questions. Who was I now without the role of Daniel's wife? What did I want to do with this second chance? I began small. I redecorated the house, stripping away every reminder of him. The leather couch he loved was replaced with a soft cream sofa. The whiskey cabinet became a bookshelf. His office became my art studio, where I painted late into the night. Each brushstroke felt like therapy, like reclaiming pieces of myself I had long buried. Then, one afternoon, as I was leaving a cafe, I saw him. Daniel. He looked thinner, his expensive suits replaced with wrinkled shirts. His eyes, once sharp with arrogance, were now dull. He saw me before I could turn away. Claire, he called, jogging to catch up. I stopped, holding my coffee tightly. Daniel. He gave a sad smile. You look different. Happy. I am, I replied simply. There was a pause. Then his voice cracked. I miss you. For a moment, I felt a pang of the past, the years we spent together, the dreams we once shared. But then I remembered the lies, the betrayal, the way he had made me feel worthless. Daniel, I said softly, you don't miss me. You miss the version of me who tolerated your lies. His face fell. He reached for me, but I stepped back. I wish you the best, I said firmly. But I'm not your salvation anymore. And with that, I walked away. That was the last time I saw him. Not long after, his company officially dissolved. He filed for bankruptcy. From whispers I later heard, he left town quietly, unable to bear the humiliation. For him, the story ended in ruin. But for me, it was just beginning. Months passed. My art studio grew into something more. People began noticing my work, first at local exhibitions, then at small galleries. For the first time in my life, I wasn't someone's wife or someone's shadow. I was Claire, the artist. And with each canvas I painted, I poured out the pain, the betrayal, the revenge. Until slowly, those feelings no longer owned me. One evening, as I stood at my first solo exhibition, a woman approached me. She looked nervous, clutching her purse. Are you Claire Bennett? She asked. Yes. Her eyes welled up. Your story. I read about it online. The way you exposed Daniel, the way you walked away, I just want to say, you gave me courage. I was in a toxic marriage too. And because of you, I left. Tears pricked my eyes. For the first time, I realized my revenge had become more than just personal. My survival had become someone else's inspiration. That was the real victory. Later that night, standing on my balcony, I looked up at the stars. Daniel had once made me beg for his love, made me feel small and invisible. But I had risen. I had reclaimed my power. And though revenge had been the fire that fueled me, healing was the light that guided me forward. I smiled to myself, whispering into the night, this is my life now. My story. And no one will ever write it for me again. Epilogue. Daniel vanished from the city, a man stripped of everything, his wealth, his mistress, his pride. Melissa moved on, chasing money as always, but her name faded into gossip no one cared about anymore. And Claire? She built a new life on her own terms, her art flourishing, her heart finally free. Because sometimes, revenge isn't just about destroying someone else. It's about reclaiming yourself. And that was Claire's greatest victory of all. The end.